Hello again, welcome back. I'm going to talk a bit about Return of the Musketeers, another obscure film, just like the Valiant ones. Um, this film is a sequel to the 3 and 4 Musketeers, but it came out like 15 years later. The same cast, more or less, and same director, same writer, one of the same producers, but importantly, two of the other producers are missing. And that's really important for a reason. Um, the film was much lower budgeted than the original, and even though Richard Lester is very good at getting a lot from his budget, and they shot in Spain like the original, it doesn't have the same epic feel of the original. And you do get a sense of it could have done another 10, 15 minutes, really, to flesh out certain things that an atmosphere and in plot that would have helped. There's another reason why it's a little lacking, and that's because the producers, the Salkins, who produced the original, did not produce this one. They were coming off the Superman films, which had Lester directing quite a few of them, and Pierre Spengler, who's actually one of the producers of this as well. So it's so basically they must have. So even though these people had helped him with their films, they did not look upon this new film as something great for bringing back all these cast members without them. Now, Richard Lester and Pierre Spengler actually wanted some footage from the original film to intersperse through the film to make a point about how people age. The idea was this is a youthful version of them. This is them 20 years later, and see how they've changed or how they haven't changed. And it was meant to be a kind of meditation on aging through this adventure romp. Now, because the Salkins were a bit bitter that they weren't producing this film, I don't know why, if they didn't want to do it or if they were annoyed that it was done without them, but these were collaborators with them for a long time. You'd think they'd say, oh, yeah, okay, just use footage. But no, they wouldn't. So it gives the film a problem in the sense that there's certain scenes you think, this is definitely there, and it would have probably been flashbacks to younger footage, and have given you an idea of what the film's going for and what the atmosphere is. Because Lester had already done the Robin and Marion, where he had an older Robin Hood talking about his old experiences. And so he knew how to do that. But I think the idea was to do it like visually as well, the idea of actually having footage of the younger versions. And it would create an atmosphere throughout, an idea of things repeating, things evolving, but you're not really escaping your past. Everything's sort of a ghostly feeling to you. Sort of like what Soderbergh did with the Limey. But you don't get that. Because Soderbergh used a film called Poor Cow, which Terence Stamp was in the 60s, and Ken Loach directed, and Ken Loach let him use footage from it for a young Terence Stamp in the Limey. I think that they were going to go for that for Return of the Musketeers, and it would have made a lot of sense in the story. It would have given you a real sense of like these ghosted figures who've are out past, they've outlived their usefulness to society. They're no longer the heroes they were, and most people see them as just embarrassment. And the world's moved on and it's cynical, and you can only get that from voiceover now. And there's a feeling of the certain things are trying to suggest that if you had the footage, it would have more impact. Not just the younger version, the older version, the same people, but also there's a figure of the daughter of Faye Dunaway's character is made up to look like her. And if he had the footage, it would have created this kind of, she's referred to as almost a ghost, a haunting of a mother. And I think if we had the footage there, it would have really have made it feel like an emotional beat. Where instead here it just feels like a plot beat. And there's things like that happen throughout where it's like, this would have worked so much better if you had that footage. It would have created a mood that would have got you past certain plot things without an issue. So it's kind of a shame they don't have that. It's kind of a shame they don't have that kind of in the film, because it would have really done wonders for it. And you also have characters like Athos's son, Raoul, who's obviously a bit like D'Artagnan in the sense of he's youthful and in love, even though he's a lot smarter than D'Artagnan was. But there's still an echo of that in this character, and there's a sense of echoing emotions throughout time. Would have done wonders for the film and how people echo each other and things. It would have worked really a lot better. But you don't get that because this footage isn't there. And they brought in like it was based on a Dumas novel, but they changed some things and moved things around. But they actually kept a lot of the story. And the story is 20 years later, the king from the first one has died. Cardinal Richelieu has died. So it's Cardinal Mazarin now who's having an affair with the Queen, and he's trying to manipulate everything to his own good. People are asking for reforms, and that's supported by two of the Musketeers, Aramis and Athos. Well, D'Artagnan is a working stiff for the Musketeers, and Porthos wants a dukedom because he's got lots of money now. So they end up. So one of the interesting things in the film is they end up pretty much being on the side. Like D'Artagnan for the world is on the side of the villains because he's just trying to make a living, and that's the stuff that Letzer does really well, and it's a charming thing throughout the film. All that stuff, the world, the idea of these aristocrats who don't have a clue who all these rights on and just make them grumble. And this just sense of this world that's just doesn't really know what it is. And it's a world that's going to be gone, in 150 years. Because this takes place like in 1650. It's during the time of Civil War in the UK. And the King Charles is about to be charged with treason, and the French think that this cannot happen. But the practical side of it is just let it happen because the French no longer can afford a war with Britain. And so there's a lot of like political stuff, like we will object, but not that much. We'll object, and you can ignore us, which goes on in the world now a lot. So there's lots of stuff that still travels through the world. And there's lots of those kind of details that really work throughout the film. There's a sense of everyone's for sale, everything like any nostalgia is used as a selling point. People are abandoned quite easily. People don't keep touch with each other. It's just a lot of like cynicism, and Lester's great at that. But the lack there of those flashbacks really holds him back. There's other things that hold him back too. One of the big things is one of the characters he had to always show that the poor in the society is Planchet, played by Roy Kinnear. Now, Roy Kinnear died during making this film. He fell off his horse during a scene with riding over a bridge. He broke his pelvis. He was then taken to a hospital, to a medical place where he was dealt with. Then he was taken to another hospital, and at that hospital he died of a heart attack. Now, there was lawsuits after it, but it was one of those situations where that was a devastating thing for the production. Like Richard Lester was a friend of Roy Kinnear. So during his watch on this film, his friend died, and he never made another film again. He just stopped making films. That was it. So it was a tragedy for him for losing his friend. If you're a film fan, it's a tragedy that Richard Lester stopped making films because he was a really good director. And it's just a terrible situation. And in the film, it really hurts the film too because he's in the early parts as you see him in the Lincoln bit between all the Musketeers early on. Then he disappears for half the film and then comes back at the end. So obviously they shot the scenes beginning and the end first, where all the Musketeers were together. And then the accident happened and all hell broke loose. So it was a very difficult situation for everybody. And the lack of Planchet in a lot of scenes means you do not get the person who the Musketeers abuse all the time, the person who has to suffer through the indignities of life, which was his point in the films. This idea of like these are the heroes who are unworthy at times, and this is how they treat the servant, and you really lose a lot there because you get a feeling there's a lot more for his character to do in the film that suddenly you don't have anymore, and there's an imbalance in the equation because in the Lester films, Planchet actually was an important character. He was like pretty much the guy who hung around with the Musketeers. He was a guy who was always with the Musketeers. So it's 4 Musketeers and him, basically, for most of the films. And without him, it really feels different. And Richard Chamberlain's not in it that much either. He's in the end in a little bit scenes that here or there. Partially due to the plot, but also I think partially he was angry about what happened with Kinnear. And there's that imbalance too. There's also the idea that the Musketeers are fighting each other at certain times a little. They're a bit angry at each other, but because they're still friends, they don't really get that angry. People switch sides, and D'Artagnan and Porthos realize pretty quickly that they were pretty much on the wrong side. And D'Artagnan more or less says, what does it matter which egomaniacs in charge? They're all just going to ruin it for the people anyway. So there's this wonderful cynicism about whoever gets in charge is going to be more of the same. So there's lots of things like that going on, but you lose momentum without Kinnear being there. And there's also a sense of the film is a bit short than it should be. Like, maybe the flashbacks were taking care of some of that, but also you're feeling there's a couple of plot points where abridged a bit too much, and it would have been helpful to get a bit more. Now, maybe there were scenes that were cut for pacing, I don't know, but there was a sense of those little bits that could have explained it more. The other kind of problem, and this I think is a problem without the flashbacks more than that's a problem in itself, is that the Lady de Winter's daughter character, who's a son in the novel, but is a daughter in this, played by Kim Cattrall. She's good in the film, but she's echoing Faye Dunaway from the first film. And the setting it up is almost like she's almost like a ghost haunting them. But you never feel it because you don't have those flashbacks. So her plotting is fun, but also can feel a bit mechanical. Even though it comes from the book, like the offspring of Milady de Winter's actually coming to get them. It feels like a sequel plot idea without those flashbacks to make it feel much more like it's there is something almost supernatural going on here, or something that echoes something else, and it would have given you a sense of something beyond plot, because there's a lot of good scenes with her where she's fighting Raoul, where she's fighting the Musketeers in her house, and she's lots of traps all over the place, and they're all swan into them all. There's things like that going on. There's also a scene where she's the person who actually cuts the head off the king. While the Musketeers try to protect him of King Charles I, and it makes their whole thing a disaster. There's that. Again, that would work beautifully. But if you feel losing those scenes made it feel more mechanical. Rochefort comes back, Christopher Lee, and he's a lot of fun. People were a bit annoyed because he died in the last film, but he's actually in the book. Like, Dumas did that. He brought him back as this figure from the past who was once a terrifying figure and is now just this grumpy old man who people have to put up with, and it's like, and he's not good at his job anymore, and it's this idea of aging and how terrible it can be for some people. And again, another thing where every footage of Melody would worked a lot better. Just that thing, you just lost someone that would have protected the rest of the film from certain imbalances in the story. Because I think the story itself is episodic. It's like it's dealing with 2 or 3 plots, and it's jumping with confidence between them, and there's a lot of good stuff in there. But the spine of it does seem to be like bent a little bit out of shape because of the tragedy on the set, plus the producer problem getting footage. It just feels like a lot of stuff was there that they were really wanting to do, and they couldn't do anymore. But it's still a very worthwhile film. It's still a very enjoyable film. I had a good time. I watched it on projector and saw it projected for the first time. I'd only ever seen it in video before. And so it was really nice to see it with a proper 1080p print. A print that had been transferred to 1080p. I mean, my tongue went crazy there. And it was good to see that and actually see a good quality edition of it. So you can see a lot of the pleasures involved in the film, and the flaws are just flaws. It's still a worthwhile film. It's got its problems, but there's still a charm to it. It's not the best many years later sequel, but it's not the worst either. It's a nice little sequel. I think perhaps the material that they had with Dumas might not have been as strong as the first book they had from Dumas. That may have been a problem. I think it's some of it's the source material, and they tried to do the best they could with it. But you read through the plot synopsis of the original novel they're based it on, it's pretty episodic as well. So it's got I guess a problem of the material they're based on, and they found a way to get through that, and all hell broke loose during the production. So it was just a cuss production. There's not much you can do with that. It's just this is bad luck. But it's still another worthwhile Richard Lester film. He did a lot better films than this, but this is still a good one, despite its flaws. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it makes you want to go and see Return of the Musketeers. It's definitely worth seeing. And I'll be back soon with some more. Right, bye for now.